Hello and welcome to Photography with Emery, and that would be me, and this is episode 10 on how to create 3D photographs. First, I'm going to begin by how you can actually view them.
First, let's start with anaglyph images, as they are quite common and something you may already be familiar with. Anaglyph images are those that require you to wear color-coded glasses, such as those red, blue ones I had on during the intro. You then look at a single image that is actually composed of two shots, one for the left eye and one for the right, which are also color-coded. When the anaglyph image is viewed through those color-coded glasses, you can generally see the picture in 3D. You can also use shutter glasses to view a 3D picture or even motion picture for that matter. The way the system works is that if the display you're watching is showing an image meant for your right eye, then the shutter glasses you're wearing would black out the lens of the left eye so you could only see through the right lens. If the image on the display is meant for your left eye, then of course the right lens would be blacked out, allowing only your left eye to see the image. But for this to work properly, the glasses must be synced with the display and the screen refresh very quickly, otherwise your brain won't be fooled into thinking it's actually seeing a 3D image. Another variant to the previous methods is polarized projection systems and polarized glasses. In this case, you can always see through both lenses at all times. What happens here is that two projectors are used, one with footage for your left eye, the other for your right eye, and as the light exits each projector, it is polarized at a certain angle. The glasses that the audience wears are also polarized at an angle which matches the polarization from each projector, hence why viewers can only see the left or right image with their appropriate eye. Moving away from glasses, you can also use cross-eyed and parallel viewing techniques. In this case, the image you look at has two separate pictures. For cross-eyed viewing, the picture on the left is actually meant for your right eye, and the picture on the right is for your left eye. For parallel viewing, the images correspond to your left and right eye. The downside to these viewing techniques is that for some people it may be impossible or very difficult to view, but visit my blog to find out more about this.
There are also numerous of these devices on the market, stereo viewers. This is one of my favorites. It's collapsible, you can kind of shut it down, and it just uses standard 4x6s with two pictures, left and right image, in portrait mode. There are several other varieties available on the market, but you can check out my blog for more. The nice part about these is that all you have to do is pretty much hold it up to your face like that, and look into the lenses here. As long as you have light hitting the picture, you should have a pretty good 3D view.
Now that we know about a few different ways to view 3D images, let's start talking about actually creating them. First up is whether to use one or two cameras, and to analyze this, let's look at the pros and cons of each. Starting with one camera, one of the major pros is cost savings. Having two digital SLRs with identical lenses may not be feasible for a lot of us out there. A second pro is that you can still create 3D photographs with one camera. Two cameras aren't always necessary. But this is where we get into some cons. For one, if you're shooting scenes where there's a lot of movement, then two cameras are a must. If the difference between the left and right image are too great, the 3D effect is simply lost. Our brains just won't be able to process the information. And two, because you have to physically move to take the shots, whether you choose to handhold the camera or set it on a tripod, you may end up with some extra post-processing to line the two images up properly. For example, the left image may be more tilted than the right. Now let's look at the pros of two cameras. As basically already mentioned, two cameras will allow you to take two pictures at almost exactly the same time, so there's little worry about things that may move in a scene. Also, if properly set up, you may not need to post-process the photographs much compared with a one-camera setup. But as for cons, your costs could increase as you essentially need twice the equipment to get the job done, not to mention special adapters for holding two cameras at the same time, and handling the gear could become more cumbersome. If you're really interested about 3D photography, I've included more detail in my blog, so feel free to take a look there.
The next step when you're taking 3D photographs is basically your position. So assuming you're using one camera just to keep things simple, position basically is how far you're actually moving from side to side. If you're shooting objects that are fairly close within a few meters, it's generally a rule of thumb is keep the distance about the same as the distance between a pair of eyes. So you're not actually moving a whole lot from side to side. However, if you're going to shoot things that are way in the distance, for example, I've shot a few 3D images that are of mountains, and or mountain landscapes, I should say. And in those cases, I've actually moved several meters from side to side in order to get a more stereoscopic effect. Standing too close, you just won't see the difference on the photograph. So that has actually helped me. I've also shot a downtown scene, and as you can see here, and in this case I kind of lucked out. The car traveled probably about 10 meters, and I was just shooting out a window and managed to line up the pictures. But because the buildings are, you know, very far away, several hundred meters, it really helped to bring out that 3D effect. Also related to positioning is the angle of your camera. Generally, when you're shooting some sort of a 3D object, one of the things you have to pick is a point somewhere in that object, and you essentially rotate your camera around it. Now remember how I kind of said at the beginning of the video that your eyes are kind of cross-eyed when you're actually viewing? That's kind of what you want to simulate as well. You don't just want to keep the camera straight and then move from side to side. You actually want to keep the camera pointing at whatever you are shooting, and that way you're going to get a somewhat better effect. You're going to get something similar to how we actually see in reality. And when you create pictures like that, it actually does work quite well. And as a quick reminder, you also have to keep in mind the orientation of your camera. So for example, if I'm using my stereo viewer, I have to shoot in portrait, so I have to keep that in mind as well. Of course, if you're doing something like a 3D anaglyph with those blue-green glasses, you might be able to get away with just using a landscape because you can view the images on your monitor, for example. So in that case, it's not that important.
And if that wasn't enough information for you, here's a bit more to help ensure you can get great results when taking 3D photos. Other than the viewing angle, we basically see two very similar pictures. Our eyes focus on the same spot, as well as see the same brightness and color. A digital camera, on the other hand, might behave differently when you take those two shots. So to help keep both pictures looking as identical as possible, remember to do the following. 1. Lock your focus on the subject you're shooting. An easy way to do this is to autofocus first and then set your camera to manual focus mode after. 2. Lock your exposure to the first shot you take. There are several ways to do this, from holding down function buttons to shooting in full manual mode on your camera, allowing you to specifically set the shutter speed and aperture. 3. Specifically set the white balance. Differences in color between your left and right photo could detract from the 3D effect. And 4. Keep your camera level in both shots, or at the least, oriented in the same fashion. For more detail and tips, check out my supplemental blog post.
So now that you've shot your photographs, you want to put them together, and this you can do in your favorite image editing program. And again, I've linked in my blog to a few sites where you can create 3D anaglyphs, the blue-green. There's some simple things that you can do with channels in Photoshop, for example, where you can do that. And or if you're doing something similar to what I usually prefer with a stereo viewer, then again, you can crop your photos, line them up nicely. So basically that's all that's left, is to actually edit your pictures. In my blog I've written a simple tutorial on what you have to kind of watch for, so do check that out. And that's pretty much your last step, and then you print your picture or view it on the screen, share it with the world, and you basically have created some 3D photography. So thanks for joining me on the 3D special. I hope you enjoyed the episode and you'll be able to create some fantastic 3D photographs. Do check out my blog because it does have a supplemental post there, and you know, I'll have some links to other websites further on this topic, as well as subscribe, as well as check me out on Facebook. You can become a fan there so you can stay up to date with what I'm up to. And don't forget, you can also send me your questions on photography, and hopefully I can either demonstrate that or answer your questions on future episodes. So I certainly hope to see you next time. Take care.